I'm going to call the Wilmington School Committee meeting of Wednesday, October 9th to order. Tristan, you're confusing me. I thought you were back there. Let the record show that all members are present, please. Okay, our first item on our agenda this evening is an executive session. The purpose of this executive session is to discuss the reputation, character, physical condition, or mental health rather than professional competence of an individual, or to discuss the discipline or dismissal of, or complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual. I will ask for a motion to move into executive session. If you could read, Mrs. Burns, if you could read the whole motion, please.
Yep. I move that the Wilmington School Committee enter into executive session pursuant to MGLC 30A21A1 to discuss the reputation, character, physical condition, or mental health rather than professional competence of an individual, or to discuss the discipline or dismissal of, or complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual. Higgins, open meeting law complaints, to return to open session.
Could I have a second, please? Second. Mrs. Kane, thank you. Roll call.
Yes.
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 Mrs. Bonish, yes.
Yes.
Mrs. Burns, Mrs. Broussard, yes. Mrs. Kane.
Yes.
Yes.
Mullis and Talbot. Thank you. They're going to get our first candidate, who's Dr. Joe Connolly. Sure her phone's on. I'd be the one. Hello.
How are you? Welcome.
Dr. Connolly, we presume.
Yes.
And hopefully you found parking okay. A little busier here this evening than we
It took a
expected.
while.
Thank you for coming and joining us. I am Julie Broussard. I'm the chairman of the committee. What we thought we would do is give you a chance to introduce yourself to us and maybe make a brief statement, and then we will move into the question part of our interview. Okay? Thank you.
Chris, it's nice to be back. Very, very impressed with this facility. You know, it's my first time seeing it inside. You know, it's very, very impressive. I started my career in Wilmington. I spent almost half my career here, 19 years. I was started at the West Intermediate as a math science teacher, then moved on as principal of the Woburn Street School for pretty much in the entire 1970s through 1979. Then I was asked to take over the North Intermediate when it was an intermediate school. I was there for about 6 or 7 years, and then they asked me to be the acting business manager. And so I spent a year in central office at the Roman House before I moved on as a superintendent. And I think that is probably my most driving reason for being interested in this interim position, because Wilmington has been such a big part of my life. And my brother. My brother was a social studies teacher here for 38 years at the North and at the West. He just retired 3 years ago. And so to have a chance to come back and maybe help out is something that I'd value very much. I believe my experience as a superintendent in the Tri-Town and then in Stoneham for many, many years, 22 years in total, certainly gives me the experience to be able to step in and do the job. But since I retired from being superintendent in Stoneham, I've taken on unexpectedly a series of interim jobs. It was not my plan to do that, but I got a call my last day on the job in Stoneham, where I help out in Berlin-Boylston. A superintendent was quite ill, and it started a series of interim assignments. So I not only bring to Wilmington many years' experience as a superintendent, my background here in Wilmington, but also my past 9 years doing a number of interim jobs, which I think have helped me be a little more sensitive to how an interim administrator is most effective. And I've learned over the past several years through a variety of assignments how I feel I can help communities during this transition period.
Great, thank you. Mr. Mullis, we'll start down your end this evening.
Good evening. Nice to meet you.
Good.
I have a two-part question, and I want to get it started. On a personal level, I'm struggling with the decision whether we need to hire an interim superintendent while we search for a more permanent superintendent versus hiring someone on as an interim that will work their way through a permanent position. So you've been around for a long time. You've taken interim positions. So I'd like to get your thought on that thought process and get your thoughts and get your feeling on that. And then number two, if we as a board decide to select someone on an interim basis while we search for a more permanent candidate, why should we hire you?
Good. Well, I think as hiring an interim to potentially be your permanent superintendent certainly is a way to go. If you have a very, very strong candidate that you feel is a perfect match for Wilmington, then you can do that, and it works out, and I've seen it be very successful. In most cases, school committees hesitate to hire an interim candidate that's going to be a candidate for the permanent position, because they feel that the interim, being an active candidate, will somehow impact the number of candidates that apply for the job. Many people will look at a position that's posted, and knowing an interim is applying for the job, they may hesitate to apply for the job. So in many cases, they hesitate to do that, and they make the condition that you can be an interim as long as you're not a candidate for the job. However, clearly, if you had a strong candidate, that would give the person a chance to get his or her feet wet, and he or she could step in and do a fine job. In my many interim positions, I've had a chance to also help the school committee in the hiring process for the next superintendent. I was either co-chair or directly involved in many ways. And I've found that if an interim is able to help you with the search process, for example, we just finished in Brookline last year. I helped the school committee go through that search process. We started in October, we finished in February. And that gave me a chance from really late February through June to mentor and work closely with the new superintendent. So that the new superintendent started July 1st, already with a strong, rich background and understanding of the issues in Brookline. They've asked me to actually stay on this year on a part-time basis to continue to work with that superintendent. So I've seen it work both ways, all right? I think, I would say, if you can start the search as soon as possible, right now is about the best time, maybe, you're maybe about a month behind schedule. But if you could start the search and get it done by February, early March at the latest, then you have those key 3 or 4 months to do a transition work using your interim superintendent to transition the new superintendent. And actually, on a couple occasions, I've been asked to stay on during July and August to also help with the transition of the new superintendent. So I think it works. I think you could also, delay the process. In Harvard, we delayed the process. We didn't feel we had a strong pool of candidates, so they brought me back for a second year as an interim. And then we identified an in-house principal who we felt could do the job. They asked me to mentor that principal for the whole year, sharing the budget process and many of the superintendent process with the superintendent-elect. So I had a chance to mentor that person for a whole year before she took over at Harvard as the superintendent. And that worked very well, too. I think the key is building in a transition time so the new person can be mentored and supported in the new position. Why am I interested in Wilmington? I've been approached this year for a few other interim jobs, and I've said no. Wilmington was special to me because of my background and the fact I got my start here in Wilmington. And I feel I have the skill set to help you through this transition period. And so I've indicated I'm very interested in the position because I feel I can help, and I feel so strongly about Wilmington. It's a big part of my life.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your answer.
Mrs. Burns?
Thank you for your interest in assisting us in this transition. As you know, is the first time I think we've ever encountered a situation of this sort. The question, it's a two-part question as well. Can you share with me some examples of what you're most proud of and accomplishing in your internships with these certain districts, as well as, what is it for that when going into a district, some of the difficulties that are encountered, and if you could just share with us, I know everything depends,
Sure.
but what your approach to those difficult situations are.
Usually with an interim position, there's been some type of unexpected staff change. And usually when you have an unexpected staff change, it raises questions and concerns in the community, and the staff, the fellow administrators, the community at large is concerned about what that unexpected transition will do to the school system. Will it hurt the momentum you have of improving and moving forward? And so as an interim superintendent, I've learned that you have to approach the job as if it's a permanent job. It's not my job to come in here and just kind of hold things in place for the new superintendent. I feel it's very, very important to tackle this job as if I'm the permanent superintendent. We're going to continue to grow, and all of the goals you had for this year, I would attempt to achieve, all right? You do that by reaching out to your fellow administrators in your school community. You get to know them. You find out what their needs are, what their priorities are. And you make it very, very clear that you're here to help everybody achieve their goals for this year. And we're not in a holding pattern for a new superintendent to come in a year's time. I think, in my experience, what I've brought to these many, many communities is transparency, trust, people skills. People feel comfortable with me. I've been able to restore the confidence in the school system very quickly in all of these interim assignments I had. People enjoy working with me. I develop a good working relationship with the community. And I think my experience allows me to achieve that. Personnel management, budget management, ed reform, teacher evaluation. you know, I have a very strong working knowledge of all those things, so I can go in and I can help our new principals, I can help our administrators, I can help our teachers. I've had many years of teacher negotiations, so I bring a complete set of skills to the job that helps to generate confidence in the interim position. People quickly realize it's business as usual.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Bjork?
Hello, Dr. Conlon.
Hi, Steve.
You were my principal at the Wilbur Street School,
I know that.
and I appreciate that you followed me to the north. It was
9
very
years.
accommodating of you.
He was stuck with me for 9 years.
Well, 11, because I stayed back a few times.
It's nice to see you.
It's nice to see you as well. I got to tell you, you don't look a day older. I didn't know what was going to come walking in the door.
Thank you very much.
Quite frankly, look, your qualifications and your reputation are impeccable. I really don't have any questions for you, except for, and you had already touched on this, but let me ask you to clarify a little bit. The process of mentoring a new superintendent, how important is that to the success of that person in the new role?
I only have to look at my last 2 interims in Harvard and in Brookline. Okay? I think those 2 principals, Linda Dwight in Harvard and Andrew Bott in Brookline, started from day one with a preparation that they were ready to start day one. They didn't need 3 or 4 months to go through an entry-level plan. They knew what they needed, they knew what the priorities were, they felt confident in their position. And I feel mentoring before they start and giving your new superintendent as much information about the school system as possible ahead of time is invaluable. And then if you can provide that ongoing mentoring during the year, if the person's first year on the job, it's even more so.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to ask you to delve in a little bit more to the question that Mrs. Burns had asked. Can you give us specifics about how you would tackle your first 90 days, should we appoint you the interim?
Sure. I think the first thing I need to do is meet with the central office staff, find out what their priorities are, what the goals, look at your district plan, your improvement plans, find out what goals you hope to achieve this year, and find out where we are. I'd have to meet with the school committee and find out what your priorities were. Looking at your district plan, you may realistically say, because of the transition, we can't accomplish everything, but these 3 or 4 things are really very, very important for us. It'd be important for me to find that out. I'd want to reach out to the community and let them know that I'm here. It's business as usual. We're not in a holding pattern. That's a very important message. And I'd want to meet with the principals. I'd also want to meet on an individual basis. I've done this before and it's worked out well. Instead of bringing the entire staff in, the whole staff in for a special meeting, I would go before school 8 different mornings and meet with a staff, introduce myself, and give them the message that I have an open door policy. I'm here to help, and feel free to reach out to me if you have any needs. It's also critically important to develop a working relationship with your town administrators. And so I'd reach out to the other town non-school administrators. We're in budget season. Right now, we should have our enrollment projections done. We should be, our 5-year capital plan should be just about wrapped up, and we should be giving out budget guidelines to the budget holders, all right? I assume that's well in hand, but as a superintendent, I think it's very, very important for me to be directly involved in that process. I think it adds credibility to the process that they see the superintendent being fully aware of the budget and being able to speak to it along with the business manager. I would want to, as I said, develop what these priorities are by the school committee. I would then want to come back within maybe a month or 2 months' time and report back on what I felt after being on the job for 1 or 2 months, if I felt there were any other needs that had to be addressed this year. And then I would want to give the school committee a chance to kind of tweak that, or add to it or delete. And then probably on a monthly or bi-monthly basis, I'd want to give the school committee an update on where we are with achieving those goals that you've established, you feel is so important for this year. And I think being visible, I've always had a very good working relationship with parent groups. If Wilmington has a district-wide parent leadership meeting, I'd want to meet with the parents. Otherwise, I'd probably go to school council meetings. You know, I'd want to be very, very visible in the community and in the schools to help establish a feeling of confidence in the schools during this transition year.
Great, thank you very much. Mrs. Bonish?
I have two questions. You sound like you have a lot of experience as interim, in addition to all your other experience. And it sounds like, you know, everything went well, but there had to have been a time when you made an unpopular decision. And I'm interested in if that ever happened and how that went with the public and the schools and the leadership.
I think as superintendent, that happens quite often. I think the budget process is sometimes very challenging. I believe in a transparent budget process, kind of a zero-based budgeting. I feel if we can't defend what we're asking for, it shouldn't be in the budget. And so I think Gloucester, Harvard in particular, I felt that their budget process was not as detailed or as open as it should be. And so I recommended strongly we change the budget process. There was some pushback because people were used to doing something a certain way for many years. But as it played out in those towns, they've came to realize how important it was to have a very transparent, open budget process, a lot of collaboration, and a lot of detail in the budget document. You know, I tell my budget holders what I don't want is X dollars per teacher, X dollars per classroom. I want you to identify each year what your needs are, and let's budget for what your needs are, not just lump sums of money. That was different in some of these communities, and I think there was a little bit of pushback because it's a lot more work. But at the end, they saw the importance of that transparency. And in fact, in Gloucester and Harvard, they're still using that same budget approach a number of years later.
Okay, and then I had one more question. Do you think that your skill set as interim superintendent, being that many times, is that's a necessary credential for being an interim superintendent?
I think it certainly it helps to have had the experience to go into new communities and to develop those working relationships. So clearly, it's a benefit. I don't think it's an absolute necessity. I think back on my interim positions, and the ones I enjoyed the most were being interim principals. During this past 9 years, I've done 5 or 6 interim superintendencies, but I've also done 2 in Brookline interim principal positions. And I totally enjoyed being back with the parents and the students and the school communities and getting to know the school community on a much closer basis, intimate basis than I did as a superintendent. So I think it helps to having this experience. I think I can start tomorrow, and I feel I can do a very, very solid job, and people would have a level of confidence in me from day one, right? That may not happen with a person that doesn't have that experience. Some interims may think that their job is just to kind of keep things on a holding pattern for the new superintendent. I think just quite the opposite. I feel that you really have to do your best to keep the school system moving forward and not think of this as a transition year where things are going to be put on hold.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Talbot?
Well, this is the hard part. Everybody's asked all the great questions that I had here. You know, all I got left is what snow days. What are your thoughts on that? No, I'm just kidding. Where do you stand on standardized testing?
In what way?
Just the different standardized tests that are out there, a lot of people ask questions about standardized tests and.
Yeah. Well, I think the MCAS or the POCs is the big topic right now. MCAS 2 is the way we're going. I think there's a place for standardized testing. I think it's very, very important. I think more importantly, what you have to do is help the teachers, the educators, use the test results to improve instruction, their teaching practice. I think that's why the education, the educator evaluation process, which has self-assessment, goal setting, it helps that happen. And I think we're at a point now where data-driven instruction is very, very important. You have to help educators use the data from these standardized tests to improve their teaching practice. What you get for the most part from the data is it identifies where your gaps are. And that, again, helps your educational team address those gaps and hopefully eliminate those gaps or improve lessen the gaps that exist in your school system. So I think there's a place for standardized testing. I think we have to take it very, very seriously. I think the state frameworks, the Common Core standards here, we have to respect that. We have to make sure that the teachers are teaching to the standards and that our curriculum and instructional materials support the standards that are being measured by these standardized tests.
Mr. Mullis, you're up.
I have one more question. As you know, we've gone as a district through some serious challenges over the past few weeks, and to use a word, a nice word, I think that what's happened has to have affected the faculty and administrators. You speak about restoring the confidence of the school system. So what specific steps would you take to earn back the confidence of the faculty?
Again, I go back to my many interim assignments. Just about all had an experience that was as difficult as what you've gone through in the last few weeks. Unexpected turnover of a principal, unexpected resignation of a superintendent. And so you do have that lack of confidence, you do have those questions, that uneasiness that develops. And I think the best way to do that is to go in, show people who you are, that you're committed to helping them do their job, and provide as much support for them as possible, all right? And be very open and honest and accessible. People have told me in all these districts that I was very, very effective in doing that. And it didn't take 2 or 3 months, I'm the type of person that I'm very honest, and I'm very, very sincere in what I do. And people sense that in me, that I'm here to help, I'm here to do the best for Wilmington. And I think that helps generate the confidence that you think may have been lost, is lacking right now.
Thank you.
Mrs. Burns.
I have just a curiosity question. With many districts building upon the social emotional programs, what is your take, or what's your outlook to those programs? Because I know some districts, they're coming into districts slowly but surely. What has been your experience in building those programs, or if you've had that experience?
We have the Oveus program in
Sorry?
Brooklyn. Oveus is a kind of an anti-bullying, but it's also social emotional learning too. And I think it's very, very important in this day and age to help the students, all students, not just students with special needs, but all students have a better understanding of their own self, their relationships with other students. I think it helps them be better learners and grow up to be better productive citizens by having a more greater understanding of how to deal with the challenges of life, And there are programs now that address that. And so the classroom teacher it's our job to help every child exceed to their fullest potential. You know, every child has different learning styles, every child has different emotional needs. And we have to recognize that and do our best to meet those emotional needs and learning needs in all children.
So you've had that experience about building upon the resources and tools,
We have.
not only for our staff, but for our students to succeed?
Well, we've done it through professional development with the staff.
Okay.
And so we've implemented the programs to make the teachers much more sensitive to the emotional and social needs of the kids.
But sometimes there are tools and resources that need to be a part of that process, as opposed to, we grew up saying, you're not supposed to do this, this is how you treat others, do unto others as you would want them to do unto you. I was just curious if you've had any active roles in any initiatives in the previous internships that you've carried that brought in additional supports or programming to address that realm.
What we've done to help support this, we've developed what we call advisory teaching blocks of time, where every teacher had an advisory group, right? And so after they went through professional development and the training, on a weekly basis, especially at the middle school, we had advisory blocks of time where we had a curriculum the teachers used to work with the kids and help develop these social emotional skills.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Good.
Mr. Bjork?
You had mentioned that when you walk in, you're not just trying to hold in place. So here's, my question is, let's say you walk in, you see a strategic plan in place that you disagree with. What steps would you take? I mean, would you follow that strategic plan, or would you advise the school committee to alter it?
Well, first of all, I would respect the existing plan. I would also be very honest with the school committee and say, I'd share what my reservations were. But this is something you people have worked on for a number of years, and this might be year 2 of a 3-year plan, and I would try to carry that out. But I'd be very honest and let you know that through experience of whatever, what my reservations were. But clearly, I think it's my job, as I mentioned earlier, to have you identify what the priorities are. And then that'll be my charge to try to carry that out during the year. And if you have 2 or 3 improvement plans already identified for this year, I'd work very diligently to get that accomplished during the year.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. You mentioned earlier the importance of establishing a partnership with the municipal side of our government, and here in Wilmington, we have a great collegial, collaborative approach to our town government, both from the school side and the municipal side. And I think I noticed on your CV you actually were an interim town administrator. Could you please describe for us your experience working with the municipal side of the government in the towns that you've worked in?
I think it's very, very important for the superintendent of schools, or for all of us, all educators, to give the town the message that we're part of a team, right? And it's not just our responsibility to be concerned about the schools. We have to look at the town's resources and work with the town side on how to best utilize those resources for everyone's benefit. So what I've always tried to do is demonstrate that I'm a team person. I'm going to work with the town administrator, I'm going to work with the other department heads, all right, to maximize the resources we have. Right? It's not just my job to sell the school budget or what the school's needs are. We have to be very sensitive to what the needs of the community are and to try to maximize what resources are available. I've always set up a very, very solid working relationship with the town administrator, the finance and advisory committees. As I mentioned, one of my strongest skill sets is budgeting. And as a result, the work I've done in these towns has been well received by the finance committee. And I think with that support, the town administrator, and also working with my administrative team, right? I assume we've already sent out budget guidelines, right? So now it's a matter of us sitting down individually with our budget holders, our principals, our department heads, all right? And listen to them and find out what their needs are and what our budget limitations are, and see what we can do to maximize the resources. Sometimes when you're budgeting, you have to budget based on the needs of the students. So it's not a matter of just giving every department a certain amount of money. You have to identify what the instructional needs are, what the student needs are, and your budget should follow those needs. And that has to be communicated and collaborated with your team and the town's team.
Great, thank you. Mrs. Bonish?
I'm actually good.
You're good. Mr. Talbot, how about you?
Nothing.
Okay.
All set.
Mr.
Thanks.
Lewis?
Just a quick question, and, just, if we, for whatever reason, aren't able to find the perfect candidate or the right candidate or the candidate we're looking for the permanent position, and we hire you as an interim, do you have a time limit?
Actually, I don't. And one of the benefits of a late-breaking vacancy like this is that in Massachusetts, this waiver process we talk about, this critical shortage waiver process, it goes by the calendar year. And so come January, my allowable earnings would start over again. And so actually, I think at this point in time, we could either work, if you were to hire me, I may not need a critical shortage waiver this year. But if you wanted me to stay on for a second year, or part of a second year, then I may need a critical shortage waiver for the second year. But for this year, for the next 6 or 7, 8 months, I believe that because the timing in the two calendar years, we may not need a critical shortage waiver. But if you got I think under the circumstances, you could probably get a critical shortage waiver. If you got a critical shortage waiver this year, that would allow me to be available the following year, next July.
And you would be okay with that, as far as
Yes.
your timing goes,
Sure, yeah.
in case we had to go through that process? Thanks.
Right now, I'm working 2 days a week in Brookline, assisting the new superintendent. And he's aware of my interest in this position. And I'm sure that if I was to get the job, we could quickly arrange for some type of a termination of my duties in Brookline. I'd still continue to be available to him on an as-needed basis, by telephone, what have you. But even in the meantime, the 3 days a week I'm not in Brookline, I could be here attending meetings, getting to know people, be on the job 3 days a week, almost immediately. And so I am available, and could potentially also be available if you, let's hope that doesn't come to that. But when, I really think you have time to start the search and complete the search process between now and, say, February, March, so you wouldn't need that. But if that didn't happen, there's a strong possibility that I could also be available next year, at least on a part-time basis.
Mrs. Burns?
I'm all set, but thank you.
Okay, Mr. Bjork?
I'm good as well.
You're good, okay. Anybody else before I ask one more question? How do you define the superintendent and school committee roles? It's always a little gray at places, but how do you define them?
The superintendent works for the school committee. And I provide, I carry out your directives. So I respect, you establish the policies and the goals for this year. The superintendent carries out the administrative functions. And so it's the superintendent's responsibility to develop the budget that goes to the school committee to be approved. So I'm the day-to-day administrator carrying out the responsibilities of the school system. Many times, school committee members sometimes forget their role as policymakers, and I very politely remind them, and it's fine, there's no issue. but that I'm the chief administrator that makes the system work from day to day. But I take my directives from the school committee as far as policy matters, budget matters, negotiations, things of that nature. In negotiations, I'm there to help facilitate negotiations, but I make it very clear to the union side that I'm there as a resource to the school committee.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, any other questions come up as follow-up? Okay, great. I think at this point, we can offer to you the opportunity to make a closing statement or some final remarks.
Well, I think just we've already touched on quite a few of those. My final remarks is I'm confident that I could do the job. I'd love to come back to Wilmington. I think it would be a very, very special experience and opportunity. And I do my very, very best to meet the needs of this community during this transition period. And I'm confident that we could move forward. So come June, we're gonna look back and say, boy, we had a great year. 2016, 2017 was a very, very productive year. I'm confident we'll say that in June.
Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate you being with us tonight.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Pleasure meeting you.
Nice to see you, Steve. You too.
Mr. Talbot, this time I'm starting with you. We'll be fair.
Not right after the C.
Mr. LaCava.
How are you?
Welcome back to Wilmington.
Thank you. It's so glad to be here. Very quiet in here tonight. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. I think you'll see some familiar
I
faces
do.
on our panel this
I
evening.
do.
We had
Good to see you again. Good to see you.
couple of changes in the
Yes.
past couple of years. How we'd like to run this evening is certainly open it up and give you the chance to introduce yourself to the panel, maybe say a few opening words.
Sure.
And then we'll move into the question part
Great.
of the interview.
Thank you for having me here tonight. I'm very excited to be here in Wilmington. I'm Mike LaCava. I'm currently the principal of the Harrington Elementary School in Chelmsford, which is a K-4 school. In addition to that, though, I have a wide variety of experiences. I've been a high school teacher, a high school assistant principal, a K-12 coordinator, and now, again, an elementary principal. So I have a lot of background. One of my staff members said to me, "You have quite an interesting resume," and kind of have ended up my career path. One of the things when I came out of Wilmington High School was I was going to be a band director for the rest of my life, and I was a band director for a number of years, inspired by Miss Meddy, she's still here, which is great. And then, again, my career path, I had opportunities, some superintendents I worked with really encouraged me to go into building leadership and offered me some positions and my path kind of went that way. I'm certified as a superintendent, and that's been kind of the career path I've gone on. As you remember, a couple of years ago, I was here and with you in a different building. I have to say it's an amazing building. And I drove up tonight, and the tennis courts and the field, just amazing job. So something really for the town to be proud of. I lived in Wilmington. I went through the school system. Grades 1 through 6 was the Wildwood at the time. Graduated from Wilmington High School. And again, I'm just glad to be here tonight to talk about what I'd like to bring to the table. When I saw the situation that Wilmington was going through, I reached out because I felt like this is my hometown, and if I can offer something to stabilize things, move things forward, I wanted to offer that to the committee and to the town, and I would be excited for that opportunity.
Great, thank you. Mr. Talbot, I'll start with you this time.
Good evening.
Hi.
Hi. I guess, jump right off the bat here is, what skills do you think that you have to, you've been a principal, but not a assistant superintendent or superintendent, so what skills would you be able to bring since you haven't held that position before?
Well, I think that's a great question, and I think that was the question maybe even a couple of years ago. I've been involved with many district committees and studies, and for example, I'm on the District Facilities Committee right now. We're looking into a comprehensive plan. I've been on a strategic plan committee. I've worked closely with the superintendents and assistant superintendents in Chelmsford and before that. So I feel like we've really had an administrative team versus just an assistant superintendent and superintendent. It was very collaborative. I think what I bring to the table is if you would talk to the people I've worked with or in my current position, I'm very collaborative. I make sure I'm very thoughtful. I do a lot of research. I offer opinions, but I also understand that decisions can be made. I think that all of my experience at different levels, different committees, and the way I've worked with the administrative team, it would be a natural fit for me to be a superintendent, whereas I understand the needs of an elementary principal or the middle school principal or the high school principal, and not just the principal, but the staff. What are they looking for? What are their needs? An elementary teacher has a different priority than a high school teacher, and I feel like having experience in all those levels has kind of led me down this path. I feel like I'd be very comfortable stepping in as a superintendent and leading the district with my leadership abilities and my knowledge base over the years.
Mrs. Bonish.
So, as you mentioned, you were a finalist 2 years ago. What have you done since then to move yourself towards being a superintendent? Have you?
Yeah, that's a great, I figured you would ask that question as well. What have I done? I started teaching college-level courses at Fitchburg State. I've also been part of our, working with our, like I said, our facilities committee. I've been involved with many of the committees with the superintendent. We had a new superintendent come on last year, and I've kind of worked with him. He wrote me a letter tonight because he was somebody who came new to our district, and I was somebody who I could help advise and work with him and work with the assistant superintendent. I feel like I've reached out and attended more things, tried to get myself more diverse. I haven't applied for many other positions since the Wilmington position because, as I think I mentioned 2 years ago, I want to make sure that it's a right position for me and my skill set. I just don't want to be a candidate and a finalist for every position that comes up. So I've been very thoughtful about what my skill set would fit in for the position I'm hiring. So, like I said, 2 years ago, Wilmington I felt was a great fit. I understood the decision, I understood the reasoning, but I feel like since then I've become a much more confident administrator, much more person who's aware of the state issues. We have a lot of things happening with the testing, with the MCAS and PARC and MCAS 2.0, so that's a level. We also have the unfunded mandates that we're working on, and I've been working with my superintendent on, in terms of like how do we provide the support within the existing budget. I've been working with budgets and developing those as a district. We've kind of shifted to a principal-based development, plus as a district committee. So I feel like I've been working with central office a lot more in the past 2 years. It's been a very collaborative experience. And the superintendent actually currently approached me about taking the next step. He felt that I would be well prepared and would do a great job if given the opportunity.
Thank you.
Alrighty. If you could, for us, describe your specific strategy about how would you tackle the first 90 days if we were to appoint you our interim?
Great. I have it here, and I won't refer to it, but I have gone through your strategic plan and the 3-year plan that was online to see what things that I've worked with, and actually there were a lot of similarities with that. There's a lot of talk about professional development. There's a lot of talk about MTSS and collaborative problem solving in terms of at the behavioral health of students. There's talk about collaboration between the principals, and there's a lot of goals of aligning the curriculum. And I think that being a curriculum coordinator at one point in my career would help to understand how you can align the curriculum K through 12. I would want to see where we are in the plan because it's a 3-year plan in year 2. So my first thing would do is to go with the central office staff and the administrative staff and say, where are you on all of these items? What is the status report? These are the things that I can bring to the table right away. I've gone through your budget as well, and I watched the budget presentation last week in terms of where you are financially. One of the things that's difficult is the budget. 80% of the budget, probably at least, is taken with salaries and steps and increases. So when you're talking about a school system, there's not a lot of money to work with in terms of when you want to add programs or staffing. One of the things I noticed in the budget presentation from last year was that it looked like you were trying to add some more special ed support, like paraprofessionals or aides in the classroom, or special ed teachers to help with the inclusion model. I would want to evaluate where you are with the SPED staff and meet with the SPED chairperson, director of student services, and get an idea of where you are in your strategic plan, what do we need to do immediately, and what do we need to push off to year 3, and kind of revise that plan. Usually we'd have a 5-year plan. It was interesting to see the 3-year plan, which was very specific. I also have looked at the online. There was a plan from the former superintendent of the entry plan, and she had done some work in terms of meeting with people and focus groups. I obviously, in the first 90 days, would be meeting with as many people as I could, administrative staff first, and then right to the teachers, the parents. I'd like to have some open meetings to have people ask me questions, offer suggestions, things like that. I'm very approachable, I hope. And I would kind of, again, create an entry plan that was based on my conversations for that. And take the entry plan that was done a couple of years ago and say there were some interesting points that wanted, maybe points for improvement, such as looking at the elementary curriculum and making sure that's aligned with the state standards, see where things are after 2 years, really do a lot of analysis right off the bat, but take things that are immediate and take care of them right away, take things that we want to do long-term and start revising where we need to be in, say, a 5-year plan, or even like push it down to the next year, so we can kind of, I want to say, right the ship and kind of make sure to get everybody back on track and student-centered at this point.
Great, thank you. Mr. Bjork.
So you mentioned budgeting a couple of minutes ago. How much exposure have you had to budgeting at the district level? And how would you go about leading that process?
Great. I've been through many different budget processes with different superintendents in different districts over the years. We had in our district, we did have a budget crisis a couple of years ago, which actually gave me lots of experience with budget in terms of trying to figure out where the money was going in terms of what our programs were. The budget process in my current district now is very team-oriented in terms of we work together to say, okay, so at this school, we need this staffing this year. Is there a way to shift money? Because again, as I said, most of the budget goes towards salaries. What is the amount of money that the town is giving us this year that is above the above the cost of the salary increases. Then we have the mandates that they don't give us any money for from the state, which we love those. So we kind of have to budget for those. Then we have the unknowns in terms of if a student moves into your district or moves out of district, where the circuit breaker money is. So I have a really good understanding of how the budget's put together. I've been part of budget presentations in my district. We've always put our budget together as a team and then moved forward. I've seen budgets that are very clear to read, and I've seen budgets that would take you hours to read. I'm more of the,
They all take me hours.
yeah, you know, I really feel that simple budgets, like how much do we have in the account, where are we at? I like the presentation that Mr. Ruggiero did last week, because I could go through the budget, I could see what we're spending at each school, where the accounts are at that point, and is there a need for shifting money from here to there? So I'm comfortable stepping in. I also feel that we have a director of finance here, and that's his job is to, him and I working together, mine to set the priorities for the district in terms of, overall with the team, and then him and I working together, how do we fund that? And how do we work with the town manager to get the funding we need? And sometimes we get it, sometimes we don't. The other thing I'm familiar with is Title I funding. My school is actually a Title I school, so we have the Title I grants, so I've worked with grants before, and how to administer those, what we can do under those grants, and what we can't. So I'm not a budget expert, number expert, but I'm not trying to come across as that, but I'm very confident in looking at how your budgets are set up, and also the stability you've had in that position over the years. The first person, we'd sit down, we'd talk, where are we, how are we doing for this fiscal year? We're getting to budget season now, what's our increase gonna be? Talk to the town manager, what is he looking for in terms of an increase for the school department, and then start working on that number where the needs are gonna come across.
Thank you.
Mrs. Burns?
It's nice to see you again.
Good to see you.
I have to say, I've been struggling, because I recall, I was on the last search committee, as you may remember, from the beginning to the end.
Yep.
And Mr. Mullis and I had the pleasure of visiting your district and seeing some old familiar faces.
Yep.
So I almost feel like I know so much about you already.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad, I think it was Mr. Talbot or Mrs. Bonish had asked, well, what have you done since then?
Mm-hmm.
So I've struggled to find an appropriate, just question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I'm going to pretty much ask you, what, if you can give me maybe 3 examples, you can give me as many as you like, about your biggest accomplishments thus far as a administrator and leader within your district. Maybe you can share with some of the bigger.
Sure. I actually remember your question from 2 years ago, and when I didn't answer it the right way, I'm going to answer it hopefully tonight.
I don't think there's no wrong or right way.
I know.
It's the honest.
Well, I think one of the questions you asked, which I thought was it was great to have you in our district and see our staff, was my experience around buildings. That was one of my biggest accomplishments in terms of when I was the arts coordinator in Chelmsford. They had just approved a brand-new fine arts center, or a performing arts center, and I was there from when they dug with the shovel to the end product. I was making all the decisions on everything from the seats on the stage to what colors we're going to make the seats in the auditorium. So when I walk in that building, it's very interesting. My daughter's in high school now, and she's performing on that stage. I come as a proud dad. I'm like, wow. And I'll say to her, I picked out that piano. And she's like, Dad, I don't want to hear it again. Enough of that. So I think that from that point of view, from a building, and plus as a building administrator now, I've been on the facilities committee, and we're looking at a long-term plan for new buildings in Chelmsford. I've been able to be part of that discussion because I have the history there. So that's one of the accomplishments. One of the things I felt as a principal was we had a challenge about time for staff. One of the things I read in your strategic plan, and one of the things that seemed like a need, was the staff doesn't have enough time for professional development, or really focused professional development, or even time to meet. And we were struggling with that as well, because you don't want to hire, you want to meet the 3rd grade across the district. You need how many substitutes, and are you going to get enough substitutes, and what's that going to cost the district for that hour or 2 hour of discussion? So we had that challenge a couple of years ago, and I worked with my assistant superintendent, and I said, there's got to be a way. Like, how can we figure this out? So I went to the drawing board. I think one of my strengths is scheduling, and I developed with the staff, after I kind of came up with a blueprint, the staff and I worked on a schedule that would allow, at the elementary level, at the end of the day, every other week, there is a 50-minute block of time that they alternate between having prep time to meet as colleagues, and then they meet with me twice a month. or a coordinator to talk about student work, data meetings, things like that. I was able to pilot that at my school. It was a long process because there are a lot of people, things at stake. And I worked with the union on that because we wanted to make sure change in working conditions, time on learning, things like that. I was able to do that with my staff, and then after a year, it was very successful. It now has been implemented at all 4 elementary schools in the district. So that's something I'm very proud of in terms of we expanded our specialist program, actually, in addition to finding time for teachers for in-school professional development time that they can meet with me, a coordinator, and it has made a world of difference in terms of the collaboration amongst the teachers. And as a result, when we're unpacking the new science standards, we can talk to them about that. We don't have to do it after school meeting, before school meeting. So one of the things I would love to do here as superintendent is look at all the schedules that we have at the elementary, middle school level and say, is there a way for efficiency so that we can provide more support for the teachers? So I think that's one of my biggest accomplishments as a leader. And I also think just as, we were going through some turmoil in Chelmsford, just working as a team with my fellow administrators in terms of making sure that the students in the classroom and the staff were still moving forward, even when we had some uncertainty at the superintendent level and in the town level. I don't like to, I'm not trying to bring up anything negative, but we went through some very negative things. And we worked hard. It was a very difficult time for us. And I know how that felt as an administrator, and we worked through it, and we're in a much better place now. So I feel like as an administrator, I made sure we were not protecting the staff, but making sure the staff still had the things they needed to move forward, and that kept morale up while we kind of went through some of these things, and now we're on the other end. So we're moving forward. So I think my skill set is I feel like people think I'm a collaborator and that I listen, but I'm also a decision maker and will move things forward. When people tell me I can't do it, a lot of times I'm like, there's got to be a way. And we'll find a way, and maybe it's not the perfect way, but eventually we'll get there.
Very good.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Mr. Mullis.
Nice to see you again.
Good to see you.
So you were a finalist a couple of years ago, and I visited your district, and I was very impressed by the way you handle yourself, and I was impressed by the respect that teachers, superintendent, and even the school committee gave you. But ultimately, we did not hire you, and part of that was the lack of central office experience. We are coming to a point where we are challenged having to select a superintendent in the middle of the year because of what had happened. How can we feel differently this time? How can we alleviate those concerns that the committee may have regarding the experience?
Absolutely. I think that if I was in your position, you might consider it a risk. It's a risk to look in my direction in terms of like, where is that central office experience? However, I don't look at it as a risk because I think if you look at my body of work and my experiences, everything has prepared me for this position in terms of the leadership position. I feel that some people have central office experience, and that's a great thing because they understand how that works. But I also find that sometimes the most successful people are those who've come, I don't want to say in the trenches, and have worked in buildings and understand the day-to-day operations of a school, understand about the staff, and understand what they're going through with, okay, we've got the new evaluation tool, we've got the new requirements for ELL students with the SEI course. All these requirements are going, I understand what those teachers are going through, and I think those would help me form decisions and direction for this school district. I think that over the past 2 years, I've gained confidence as an administrator. I've seen some stuff that we struggle with as a school and as a district, and I've been able to work things out like that. I think that skill set would come in. I think I'm in a better place than I was 2 years ago. I think when I went through the process the first time, it was my first time going through a superintendent process. It was the first time that I had been a finalist or even had honestly, kind of applied for a superintendent job, and I think it was a whirlwind. I remember it, but it was a whirlwind.
Whirlwind for me, too.
Right, and I think that experience made me think, okay, if eventually I want to be a superintendent, what are my gaps? And I feel like over the past 2 years, I've filled those gaps, and I'm more confident than ever that I could come in and lead the district, 10 times more than I was 2 years ago. So I don't see it as a risk for me. I see it as, if you look at my work, if you talk to the people I work with now or have worked with, this is my 24th year in education. Right out of college, I've been a teacher. People are like, well, yeah, you might consider me young, but this is 24 years for me. So I have lots of life experience, lots of experience within the schools, and of course, ultimately, a love of Wilmington, because this is where I got my start. So for me, the reason I even expressed my interest in coming back was because I felt like I could offer more now, and I also felt more confident, and I felt like I wanted to be here to lead the district through the next phase.
Can I ask a quick follow-up question? So, part of the process, if we decide that we would go in a direction where we hire a interim superintendent on a temporary basis while we search for that superintendent, do you still have the desire to go through that process again?
I thought you might ask that question. To be honest with you, if I had to answer tonight, I think that in 3 months, I'm not going to change. My experience isn't going to change. I'm not going to get central office experience in the next 3 or 4 months when you go through the process. I would hope that maybe I would end up in front of you again for a third time, maybe as a finalist again, and you'd probably have the same questions. So I'm not sure I would want to put my staff through that process. My staff a lot of them are probably watching tonight. They knew it was going to be live streamed, and I think that they're hopeful and they support me 100%, which I'm very confident of. But they've been anxious, even in the past week since I got the phone call to come in. So I'm not sure, I can't give you a yes or no, but at this point I feel like this is me, this is my experience, and if it's what you're looking for and it's the fit that you want, and I'm the person for you, absolutely I'm on board. But I feel like I'm not sure if I would go through that 4-month process a third time or a second time. I'm just being honest.
No, understood.
Great. Mr. Talbot?
So you've seen the rough waters we've been through for the past few weeks, and just wondering, how will you steady the ship, you used a little earlier, so to speak, with the Wilmington school system, with the administrators, the teachers, the residents, students, and everything else?
Well, like I said, the first thing I do is I need to start meeting with people. I need to start getting the central office staff and meeting with them, get out in public, start meeting people, be at events, be at meetings, meet the selectmen, town manager, and all of that, to reassure them that we're going to be on track. It's going to take us some time, but we're confident that we're going to get through this. One of the things, I think your central office staff, there's 2 people I've worked with before, and so I feel like they know how I work, and we've worked as a team before. I think that's a positive and a benefit. But I think that just the way I'm going to reassure people is going to be not through my words, but my actions. I feel like I work really hard. I feel like I'm committed to what the districts I'm working in. I'm committed to the staff that I work with. And I also feel like I care about the staff. I think if you talk to my staff now or anybody I've worked with in the future, in the past, I want to listen. I want to listen to people. I want to reassure them. And again, I can tell them that over and over again, but until they see me working, until they see some decisions I make, until they see some of the things that move forward, they're not going to be convinced. One of the examples I would give is when I became the principal at the elementary school, I was appointed as an interim principal. It was June, and the principal was leaving. The superintendent asked me, I was a high school assistant principal, asked me to take over the elementary school. That was a space that I wasn't as comfortable yet. So I was there as an interim, and the staff were kind of like, who's this guy, like coming from the high school, and who's this person, and with a music background, and now a high school person is going to run the elementary school. And it was a risk for me, and it was, I think, a leap of faith on my former superintendent. After 3 months, we created such a great working relationship that when the permanent position came up, they were in my office saying, you've got to apply, we want to keep you here, we're doing a great job. And again, that was only after a couple of months. So I feel like, and now it's interesting because I had a few conversations with some staff even today, and they said, I wasn't quite sure about you. And I said, yeah, you guys were, I knew that. I said, I would be in the same place you are. Who is this person? They said, but you just ran with it. You didn't, you came in as an interim, but I never saw myself as an interim. I saw myself as the principal of that building. And it was my responsibility, as long as I was principal of that building, to move them forward, because they had had a principal for 5 years who was well-loved, did an amazing job, one of the strongest administrators in the district. So I was following a tough act to follow, and I feel great that I've brought my school, and even within the district, a lot of administrators come to me to bounce ideas off of in scenarios. So I think my actions will calm people, I hope, and kind of get us to a point where we're going to be okay. I'm going to work through this. I'm going to take my skill set, and we're going to work together, and we're going to get right on track. And I'm confident that I could do that.
Mrs. Bonish?
Can you describe a time when you made a decision that was met with resistance, and describe how you got through it? As a superintendent position is going to make decisions that.
Absolutely. There's been a lot of decisions that aren't popular sometimes. I can use one example, but before I do that, I think that one of the things that people respect me for as an administrator is I will listen to all sides, so that when we get to an unpopular decision, if it's not the way they wanted it to go, they respect the decision because they feel like they've been heard. That's the feedback that I got. That's how I am as an administrator. I will listen to all points of view, but at the end of the day, I am the administrator in charge, and I have to make the decision, good or bad, popular or not. And I live with those decisions, but most of the people who haven't been happy with my decisions will come and say, you know, I really am not happy with this, but I appreciate that you listened to me, and next time maybe we can discuss going in a different direction. The schedule is a perfect example, because administrators in my district really hadn't changed schedules before without a lot of resistance from the union and from, you know, the time and learning and stuff like that. I spent, you know, people kept telling me it can't be done. You can't find extra time. You can't make it happen. It's not going to happen. We've tried before. And I have to tell you, it kind of gave me that fuel to keep going. And I'd bring a proposal before them, and then all of a sudden I would get, you know, I met with the union president, and they'd be like, well, you know, you get this. Okay, yep, I'm going back. You know, here we go, you know. I pride myself in that some people weren't happy with the schedule change, but as they lived the schedule change, they understood how much better it was. And there were people that will never love the schedule change. And actually, there was a lot of resistance when the schedule went out to the other 3 elementary schools, because they felt like we were dictating what their schedule was, and it came from my school, and it was my thing. And there was a grievance because they felt like, you know, and I had gone through it with them, and there was a grievance, and we met about it, and there was no basis for the grievance. So I felt confident because I had done my homework, and I could go back and say, this is the process I went through, this is the amount of time, this is that. So it's an example of something I've given a lot of thought to that was a district issue that I led and now is having an impact. And for some people, even now, they'd be like, well, I'd like to go back to the old schedule. But you're always going to have that those people. I think that a good benchmark is, you know, you get 80% of the people on board, you're doing okay. You know, you always try 100, but that's not going to happen. I aim for at least 80%. You know, try the 90 once in a while. It depends on what the decision is.
Thank you.
Thank you. I may have even asked this question of you a few years ago, but here in Wilmington, we have a very collaborative approach to working with the town side of our government. Could you please describe for us your experience working with the municipal side of government in your town?
Sure. I think that from a school community point of view, obviously, I work closely with them a lot. We give presentations. We work with them. You know, they are free to come to my building. We have meetings. We have discussions of things that are going on in the town. I've worked with the town manager before on certain projects. I work very closely with our DPW worker head in terms of our facilities. Him and I have known each other for a lot of years now, as I've been in the system for 11 years. So we've worked together there. Again, the town manager and I know each other and worked in, which is, I think, kind of rare, because as an elementary principal, you're not having that much work with, say, the town manager, but I live in town, and so I'm at the 4th of July parade, or I'm at the baseball fields, I'm at the soccer fields, I'm there. So people are seeing me, and I get to know people in another way, so to speak. But in terms of working with them, we've always worked with them on budget. Some of the things we've worked with them on a lot is the financial piece, in terms of making sure the town used to have one set of way of doing the accounts. The school department had another way. So there's been a lot of work, not that I've been directly involved with, but they've been putting them together, and I've had to learn how to work with that. A lot of collaboration, especially, again, as we're going through the budget season, there's tri-board meetings. I don't work directly with municipal, but I have created great relationships. So when I go to the football game Friday night, it's like, I'm talking to the town manager, I'm talking to the selectmen, I'm talking to town meeting representatives. We all know each other and work as a collaborative team, so to speak.
Great, thank you very much. Mr. Bjork?
You've created a great career in Chelmsford.
Thank you, yeah.
And I'm going to be really frank with you. Here's what I've been having trouble wrapping my head around, especially when from the time that you first reached out to us. You're looking to move into what is an interim role, and you've made it very clear that you're hoping that it could possibly become a permanent.
Yes.
That seems like quite a gamble to me. That for a career that has been on a very, very, very steady track for a long time, I mean, can you rationalize for me why you're willing to do this?
It's a gamble. It's a big gamble. One of the things, and if I wasn't confident that you would consider me for the permanent position, I wouldn't have been here. I think that one of the things that was a stumbling block, and it's probably still a stumbling block to get over, is the central office experience, in terms of that. Like I said, you can see it as a risk. As I took the interim elementary position, which was way out of my comfort zone, so to speak, and I don't see this out of my comfort zone at all, I knew that the work that I was going to do and the way I am a leader in my leadership abilities would show people what I'm capable of to help their school or district, and I would be confident that taking this risk or leap, that after a couple months, we would have a great working relationship, and you would see the vision and the abilities that I have to lead the district. A couple of years ago, I was a finalist to just become the permanent superintendent. So I believe that I have some of the things you're looking for in a leader. I went through the parent meeting and the screening committee, and it's a long process. And to be there at the end, there was something there that might have been a good fit. I'm convinced it would be a good fit for me to be here. This is the type of district I want to work for, the size of the district, my familiarity with the district, obviously my love of Wilmington and Wilmington High. The reason I reached out was because it was an opportunity to help, but also an opportunity for me to have you have confidence in me as your superintendent. And if I didn't think I could do that, then I would not take the risk. I have 3 children, I have the house, I would be leaving a very secure position, and I hope that that says something to you in a positive way, that that's how much I care or how much I would like to be part of this team, is that I'm willing to risk 24 years in my career in Chelmsford to come to Wilmington to lead this district.
Thank you.
Can we delve into a little bit more about professional development?
Sure.
You spoke about how you had arranged schedules and time in those schedules so that you could meet with staff to encourage them. Granted, this is a part of a bigger team process, but what's your experience been with workshops and resources along both in Chelmsford or outside of Chelmsford, and to encourage staffing and staff members to seek out certain things that could either strengthen their knowledge in maybe an initiative that you're trying to expedite within the school, or even if you have any, it's kind of a 2-part thing.
Sure.
Any relationship with other staff administrators in other districts.
Yep. So a couple of things. I am actually on the District Professional Development Committee.
Okay,
I
good.
represent the elementary program. So I am in charge of, with the assistant superintendent and a couple of other representatives, of setting the professional development agenda for the district. So that experience is there.
What does that look like, though?
Well, to explain to you, we have the half-days for professional development. That are the half-days. I know we all have them. We have a full day coming up because of the election. And then it goes building and department-based, because in Chelmsford, we have K through 12 and 5 through 12 curriculum coordinators. So there are days that the coordinators will plan that might be around like the science standards, the arts, foreign language, all of that. And then there are days that are building-based, and those are the principal days. And as principals, the elementary level, we try to coordinate, and we all try to coordinate the same initiative. We've had several initiatives over the years, and I know Wilmington's work on them is the MTSS, which used to be RTI.
Yep.
RTI has turned into MTSS, and we're also looking, we're doing PBIS right now. We're implementing that. So actually, our professional development this year is around PBIS in terms of how do we take that and integrate it into our everyday at our schools and in our district, and how do we train teachers. So we brought in a speaker the first day to talk to the staff. We've done a follow-up. In our next day, we're going to do another follow-up speaker and breakout sessions. In terms of that, at the level that I'm at, we've created committees that then are working on the initiative to introduce it to the kids and then train the trainer, send people out to training to come back so you kind of get the most bang for your buck, so to speak, send out people to training. MTSS has been a big initiative for us over the past couple of years, and we're starting to move it forward again in terms of supporting those students in the Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. But what our focus is, and I think that what Wilmington's focusing on, is not just the academic growth of our students, but the behavioral, the social behavioral health. We have more kids who have anxiety, even at my level, first graders being diagnosed with anxiety disorders and ADHD and all of that. And we're seeing that the classroom of 20 to 25 kids is very different than a classroom even 5 years ago. And what do we need for professional development for our staff to help those kids be successful? One of the things we've looked at as a school and as a district, we did a study group on collaborative problem solving with Ross Green. So we've been working with that, whereas a student doesn't, if a student's misbehaving and you know those kids, you tell them once, don't do it again, it doesn't happen again. That's probably 80% of your students.
Right.
Then you've got that next 10% who need a Tier 2 intervention. The Tier 2 intervention might be, I see them 3 times. Okay, by the 3rd time, maybe they get it. Then you've got your Tier 3 intervention that we need the resources for, that student, I could take away 100 recesses. Not going to happen. The behavior's not going to change because there's a reason that kid isn't behaving. Kids want to behave. They want to please. They want to fit in. And if they're not, something's going on. And as a staff and as a leader of a building, our goal is to provide staff with instruction on how we do it. We used to take away the recess. We used to send home the traffic violation, the note, stuff like that. Now we're doing stuff like a think about it sheet where we sit down with the students and say, this is what mistake you made. What we trying to accomplish, what can we do differently? And I know I'm kind of off on a tangent here, but these are the kind of like professional development. Obviously, we need professional development around the standards, the Common Core standards. Where is MCAS 2.0 going? Where is the curriculum? Is it aligned to where we want to be? Watching Ms. Gallagher's presentation on the MCAS results and diving into the where we want to focus those efforts. So you have your academic professional development, but then you have your social emotional professional development. And I've had experience with both, and we've really been doing our strategic plan in our MTSS, not around just academic success, but social emotional success. And we're in a really good place there that we're starting to move forward on.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Mr. Mullis.
As Mr. Talbot had alluded to, we've hit some rough waters over the past few weeks, and it certainly has affected faculty, has affected administration. We've had an expected staff change. Administrators have left, and we've had a lot of turnover. So if we were to bring you in, what steps would you take? What activities would you do to start that healing process, to get that confidence back with faculty and administration, and for that matter, the rest of the district?
Best thing I can do for the administrators in this district is support them. Tell them I'm here, support them. They have the question, I'm there, helping them with their advice. Really make it a team effort, bringing them together for professional development, but also just creating I don't want to say a lighter atmosphere, but like we're all people. And being an administrator is a very difficult job, and in this day and age, it's a 24/7 job. Teachers working on Sundays, Saturdays, trying to get this, that. Administrators, the phones now, it's constant emails. I probably have 10 on my phone right now that are not emergencies, but trying to give them strategies and relief from the day-to-day operations of the building and just that confidence to move on. And being a leader means leading by example, making sure that I understand that, you're having a tough day, what can I do to help? Let's get together, let's talk about what is going to be our focus. One of the things I've recognized that is difficult sometimes is leaders try to do 10 things at once. You know, okay, there's 10 things in the strategic plan we have to get done this year, and if we don't do it, we failed. That's not the truth. The truth is we're moving towards it, and instead of 10, do we focus this year because of what we've had and because of the things that are going on? Do we say, what are the 3 main objectives by June we need to get done that are going to move our students forward and build the confidence that next year we can do 5? You know, where can we build from there? It's just as simple as when you take a rubric and you try to do like 15 things on the rubric and you don't do them well. I really feel my philosophy is do some things well first and build on success. And that's what I would want to talk to the administrators about. I'd want to talk to the staff about. I'd want to talk to the parents about. What do you feel is the number one priority should be for the Wilmington Public Schools, and how can we get there? Bring that back to the staff, bring that back to the administrators, but take a deep breath, step back and say, acknowledge what happened, acknowledge what's going on, and okay, now it's time to move forward. Let's go through the plan, let's go through the priorities, make a list, and let's hit numbers 1 and 2, by June, and we're gonna take 3, 4, and 5, and if we get to 3, 4, and 5 this year, awesome. If we don't, we're gonna put 3 and 4 into next year's plan so that we can build success, because I think one of the things that we're gonna need to do right away is we wanna get a positive feeling back about our school district, a positive feeling about the direction we're going in, and so that the town is confident, that the students are confident, the staff is confident, the administrators want to work here, and they want to stay here. And I would be out to make sure we're attracting the best candidates. And in my career, I've worked with a lot of administrators, and I have people in mind that I'd be like, hey, we have an opening. Why don't you come over and work with us? And I would hope that they would want to come work here and work with me again.
Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Talbot?
Sorry.
School committee's 24/7 too.
It's my mom, sorry.
Oh, there you go. You can take it, yeah.
That's okay. Yeah, sorry. She's probably watching. Hey, Mom. So coming up in June, we have the teachers' contracts are up. What skills do you have to, with negotiating these types of contracts and things like that?
I think that, again, I haven't been negotiating contracts. It goes back to my experiences, but I've worked closely with unions before in terms of I am a big believer in, we come up with a fair contract in that we make sure that it's comfortable for both. One of the biggest things that I think, there's a couple of things contracts get caught up on. Obviously, money is one of them. In terms of there's only so much money. Like, again, I said at the beginning, with budgets, a lot of the budgets is in salaries and step increases and things like that. So being honest with the union and saying, okay, let's look at the money part, but let's also look at the, I want to say quality of life in your building. Like, what are things that you're looking for in terms of proposals? I'd be very interested to see what they bring to the table first. One of the things that we've done from the administrative side is the administrators usually get together and talk with the superintendent about what are some of the things in the contract that are working well, what are some things in the contract that we need to look at the language and tighten it up a little bit. Not tighten it up in terms of, it's not a good thing, but it's a clearer thing. A lot of contracts were written and then they kind of the language stays in place for years because they just negotiate the money piece and then it kind of moves on and then 3 years down the road you do another contract. I would want to make sure that when I came in that I looked closely at the contract, I would want to make sure that we are complying with the guidelines and the expectations in the contract, because I feel like that's a good faith agreement between the administration and the teachers. And so that would be my first priority, is to look at the current contracts and then talk to the administrative team about, what are we kind of looking at, what's working in your building, is there something we can work with the teachers for? And then with the teachers, obviously, it would be, the money piece would be a larger piece, but then after that piece, I would want to hear their back and forth about, what is this? And again, we're not going to agree on everything that they would want in a contract, and they wouldn't agree with everything we want in a contract. But I believe my negotiation style, whether it comes with a grievance or something like that, has been, okay, let's collaborate. What's your concept here? Can we work it through so that it's okay for both sides? Or if we work on this side, can you come this way? And I don't believe in going in and making demands. I don't believe in going in and having a contentious type of atmosphere. I haven't been part of the process here in Wilmington, but I would have the highest respect for the union, and like I said, I've worked with the union on a lot of projects, and I was meeting with the union president the other day, and as a compliment, it was like she said, you know, you're one of the easiest administrators to work with because we talk about issues, and maybe we don't resolve it to where we need to be. I feel like you're trying, you know, we're working together, and that would be my goal, is to work with the union president and executive board and with the teachers union to make sure that they felt it was a fair contract for the school district and for them.
Mrs. Bonish?
What is your understanding of the relationship between the superintendent and the school committee?
Well, technically, the school committee is my boss. I mean, that's, if you want to be technical, this is the position that you have the authority on in terms of hiring and evaluating and things like that. I see my role as school committee is we're part of a team. You are the community representatives, your parents, your, you know, community members, and I want to know what your goals were as we would develop goals together and what direction you would want the district to go in, and work with the administration from that. I am representing the school department with you in helping to guide our goals, but also I think it needs to be a collaborative effort and an honest relationship. You know, I feel, you know, that I try to be honest with people. I feel that if there's something that isn't quite what, you know, I would expect, I would hope that I could have an honest conversation with a school committee member and say, you know, this kind of was out of the realm of your responsibility, it really comes into my responsibility. But I see the superintendent as representing the town, representing the school committee, representing the students and the staff and the administrators, and working together. It should be a very, you should be comfortable coming to me and saying, Mike, I'm really concerned about this, or I appreciate when parents or staff come to me and say, did you hear about this is going, you know, I'd rather them come to me or you come to me, something you're concerned about, than have you be upset about something. You know, I'd rather you be upset with me and say, okay, I don't like the way this is going, or I heard about this at one of the schools, can you look into it? Absolutely. Because with all social media and with all the way things are today, it's interesting, even for me, like I was listed as a Wilmington resident. Not a Wilmington resident, just to clear that up. My parents still live in Wilmington, and I was there on Saturday, so that was great. And but just little things, and as administrators, sometimes we read things online and we go, boy, I wish they had the truth. I wish they had all the facts, because boy, this would be a different situation. And we're tied. Our hands are tied, and we kind of have to let it go. And we can take it very personally sometimes. I mean, some people have written things about me in the past, and I'm like, oh, well, no, that wasn't the decision I made. But I will say that when I called the parent the other day, and I said, I heard you weren't happy about this. I noticed at this meeting you weren't happy. What was the concern? So I would want an open relationship. I would want an honest relationship, because if we don't have honesty and trust, then we can't move forward. We can't move the district forward unless there's trust.
Thank you. Great, thank you. I'm going to skip over myself, Mr. Bjork.
I'm all set.
Mrs. Burns?
I'm tapped.
Mr. Mullis?
I don't have any more questions. Thank you.
Down the front?
Lion or wildcat?
Well, I have the blue tie on for the Wildcat. I'll always be a Wildcat. My kids will always be Lions. So there's both. You know, I have a lot of pride in this town. I think it was interesting because I was reading some stuff and looking into some stuff, and a new tradition, I don't know when it was started, but like having the older kids go to the elementary school around graduation time and show it. I think that I would be proud to be the leader of the school system that I went through. And that kids could see that, I was this kid that went through Wildwood, North Intermediate, Wilmington High School, and I've come back, and now I'm helping them to do what they want to do in their lives. So I feel I'm a Wildcat pretty deep, but my kids are Lions.
Mrs. Bonish?
I'm all set.
Okay, I would just, before we give you the opportunity to kind of give us a brief closing, so you are employed now. What is your commitment to the Chelmsford District in such that how quickly, if we were to appoint you, would you be able to make a change?
I'm very fortunate. My superintendent and I have had discussions about that, and he is ready to help me move as quickly as possible. Even though I do have a contract, I'm under contract, which I'm supposed to give 3 months' notice, but that he's ready to make a transition if I was appointed as quickly as possible, because he understands the urgency that this position would need at this time of year. So like I said, I'm very fortunate to have a supportive superintendent who understands that this is a career path for me and an opportunity for me, and would not stand in the way of kind of making a fairly quick transition, depending on how you felt about it as well.
Okay, great, thank you. And any other questions before we finish up? I think we've gotten everyone's opportunity there. Great, would you like to give us some closing remarks or?
Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate the time. I know that it's not traditional to have somebody who, the traditional path is to go with a retired superintendent to come in to kind of study things for a little bit and then do a full search. I think that the reason I'm here tonight is because I went through your process a couple of years ago. There's nothing there that you don't know about my career and things like that. So I feel like I have been vetted. I feel like I have been through the process, and I was at the opportunity that I was going, had the potential of being appointed your permanent superintendent a couple of years ago. Like I said, I'm interested in this because I think it's a great fit for me. I think my background, I think my enthusiasm, I think my confidence, and the way I am as an administrator would be a benefit for the district, but also for my skills are a good fit for this district. I understand it's an interim position, but I would absolutely want to talk to the committee about, how long you were considering that. I don't know how realistic it is as an interim to prove everything to you in 3 or 4 months. In terms of that, that's pretty difficult. I mean, I can show you a lot in 3 or 4 months probably, but, if you had questions or not, that's something we could talk, that's like down the road. But in terms of my ability to be here, I would be willing to make a move if you felt that that was the right fit for you. And if you don't, then I appreciate the opportunity. Like I said, I'm here tonight because I really enjoyed reconnecting with Wilmington a couple of years ago and meeting the amazing staff and administrators that are here. The community, it's wonderful. It's great to be back in town. It's something that fits my career at this time in terms of with my family. And I just feel like I wanted to come and talk to you tonight, and I appreciate the opportunity, and whatever direction you decide to take, I wish you the best of luck.
Great. Thank you very much for coming. We appreciate your time. Thank you. Great, thank you. That concludes our interview piece of the evening. I would like to ask perhaps we take a brief recess to pull together our thoughts, check in with children. Okay, would you like to make a motion for a
Recess for,
10-minute motion? 10-minute recess?
I'll make a motion to that. So
Okay,
moved.
great, thanks. Can I have a second, Mrs. Bonish? Okay, all those in favor? Great, thank you. We'll be taking 10 minutes. So now comes the hard part, right? The discussion part. I think, we have one person who's had experience as an interim superintendent, obviously has a connection to Wilmington. We have somebody that would be moving into that experience level of superintendent and looking to do that kind of the learn on the job piece. So I think that's the kind of two sides of the big decision for us. So I'm going to propose that we first talk about which direction we want to take as a committee between that experienced individual versus that learn on the job individual. I think that's the first decision we need to make, and then go on from there. So I guess I'll start down at the end, Mr. Mullis. Thoughts on having experienced versus learn on the job?
I think both people we spoke with today are very qualified. I'm impressed by both of them, but I have to be honest with the challenges that we're having, the timing that we have in coming into a budget season. I think it's important for us to go in a direction where we bring someone that has experience in this role as an interim and take our time in finding a permanent solution for the future, for a more permanent superintendent. That's my opinion.
Mrs. Burns?
I have to concur with Mr. Mullis. I also feel that I'm a little wary as well, that I in looking for a more permanent solution, I think I would feel better knowing being able to make a decision and looking for more permanent solution from somebody who's not themselves after that same role. I know it was brought up in discussion today that sometimes when that occurs, a lot of people won't throw their hat in the ring because, a person currently doing that job is more than likely to get hired. But I also think that the needs of our district right now does speak to experience to support and stabilize where our district in our community. So in that, I would agree with Mr. Muell's statement and go with the experience piece. Although I have to say, I very impressed by Mr. LaCava and Dr. O'Connell.
If I may, just one more thing. If we do go in the direction of an interim, I hope Mr. LaCava reconsiders and decides to go through the process again.
Right, Mr. Bjork?
I'll primarily echo Mr. Muell's comments. I think it would be unfair to throw somebody in this mix with no experience, 3 weeks without a leader in the middle of the budget process. So I think we need somebody with an awful lot of experience and ideally familiarity with the district.
Great. Mrs. Bonish?
I agree as well. I think that a retired superintendent would have the experience needed to get us through this year, rather than somebody who has such a big learning curve as never having been a superintendent.
Okay. Mr. Talbot?
Yeah, I can agree. The experience right now is what we really need at this time. But like Mr. Muehl said, I hope that Ms. LaCava definitely reapplies and goes through the process, because I think he's a very good candidate.
Great, okay, and I would share your sentiments that as we've been through quite a lot in the first past few weeks, and really want to look ahead and continue with educating our kids, that Wilmington would be best suited for somebody with having the experience already versus somebody that we might take a risk with, although I would share the same. I was quite impressed with Mr. LaCava. We were impressed with him a couple of years ago, and I do hope that he keeps himself out there and keeps himself in front of us as well. So I think we've made one decision in that we want to focus on the experience and go forward in that direction. So I guess at this point, we had Mr. Connolly here this evening. We are aware that Mrs. Benton is also interested in being considered, but was unable to be here this evening. There is precedent in town to not even do an interview process, so I think that we're being very transparent by affording the community that opportunity. So I'm going to start down this end this time. Mr. Talbot, any comments on Dr. Connolly?
I think he'd be a great interim superintendent, and look forward to working with him.
Okay. Mrs. Bonish?
I thought he was very good. He had a lot of, obviously, a lot of experience in a lot of different roles. As a superintendent or an interim superintendent several times. He was a business manager. He wore a lot of hats and has a lot of experience, so I really liked him.
Great. Mr. Bjork?
I think Dr. Connolly's his qualifications are impeccable. His reputation precedes him. I personally, I like the guy very, very much. He'd be a fantastic asset, certainly.
Great. Mrs. Burns?
I concur. I think in my vetting that I have done, I think, and his presence is fantastic. And I think comparing him in the two positions, with him and Mrs. Benton, I think there's only one aspect that really, I think we can't go wrong with either, but I think there's one piece that I do have to lean towards with regards to favoring Mrs. Benton. I do wish she was here this evening. I just had some, minor questions. I haven't seen her in 2 years. But I think her familiarity with the district could offer stability and help in the healing process that I've been hearing is occurring in the past couple of weeks. And I think her presence would bode well for both staff and our students alike. But that's, would be the only, I mean, I don't think we could go wrong with either of them, but that familiarity really speaks to me in what I'm hearing staff and, you know, students and the community are really hoping to have back. So,
If I could, I thought we were talking about one candidate at a time.
Okay,
So
oh,
I
it
would
was,
just,
I thought you were, oh, I'm sorry.
that's,
I took
That's right.
liberty, sorry.
okay.
Go figure.
Mr. Mullis?
I
Thank you.
thought Dr. Conley was impeccable tonight. I thought he was very good at answering all the questions. I thought he, one of the things that he had talked about was mentoring, taking this time to mentor someone coming in. One thing we need to realize is we're talking about hiring an interim superintendent on the short term. What I was impressed about is that is what he does. That is exactly what he's been doing. He goes into districts, he does what he needs to do till they hire someone. So as far as the experience goes, and I do agree, Mrs. Benton knows the district. I really wish she was here, because I would have had a couple of questions to ask her. So I'm a little bit disappointed at that. With that being said, I have a lot of respect for Superintendent Benton. I think she would make a great choice as well. I think Mr. Conley would make a great choice as well. You couldn't go wrong with either one. Dr. Conley, this is what he does. If we're looking to hire an interim superintendent, this is what his experience is.
Any further discussion?
About Dr. Connolly.
Right. Okay,
going to open it up to Mrs. Benton, right?
absolutely.
Right? Where do you want to say?
Which way? Let's go. Mr. Mullis first.
Let someone else start. I'll jump in. I think part of what I just said kind of will continue with my argument.
Okay. Mrs. Burns, you did
Well,
kind of
since
say,
I wrapped it up all into one, I'm so sorry. I still feel, I do feel, I think we've got two very strong candidates, two very capable candidates. And maybe speaking to what Mr. Mullis had said in his statement with regards to this is what he does, true, in all respect, but I know that Superintendent Benton, Wilmington is an investment to her, and I think not only in the position as to what she could do with where our needs are now. I know her ties and her heart is here in Wilmington, and we're just not another town, another passing town. And not to speculate from Dr. Conley, but I know of the blood, sweat, and tears that went in to build this building, and that, you know, which is an action of the investment that she has within our schools and within our community. Yes, she's been gone for 2 years, but I don't think that has left her just because she retired. And I think if there's anything that she can do to help us stabilize our district and continue to move forward, I just, that familiarity, I think, is so important, and it would just save time-wise on that learning curve. Not that I think Dr. Conley would have a huge learning curve, but knowing the staff, knowing the administrators, I think is a step up with regards to getting us back on the rails and moving in the direction that we need to continue to move on. Life doesn't stop because we're having this transition in leadership, and I think it would benefit our staff and teachers, which would only benefit our students by having Ms. Benton come back as an interim. I would be interested, though, too, I think is a question that I had is what her availability would be, whether, I'm not sure what she's doing outside since she's retired, but I don't know what her availability would be to mentoring and staying on in that capacity, or if the first round, God forbid, of the superintendent search, we didn't come up with any viable candidates. I didn't know what her accessibility would be. That would be a question that I would have. Also, would have kind of maybe lend to other thoughts. But I guess we can.
Mr. Bjork?
Right. I think that, with no disrespect to Dr. Conley, who I'm a huge fan of, we're just about to go into the budgeting process. Joanne has done that alongside of Paul for a decade. She's dealt with the town side. She knows all the players on the town side. She worked very, very well with them for a decade. She has a grasp, even before walking in the door, what the various schools and faculty and staff are going to need during this budgeting process. Regardless of one's qualifications, nobody else can walk into this district and be able to participate in the Facilities Master Plan Committee. We will be very soon negotiating a new teacher's contract. She has done that with the teachers before. They're comfortable, they know her, and she's, on a number of occasions, on every occasion, she's come up with a mutually beneficial contract between the town and the schools and the teachers. I don't think, quite frankly, there's any other choice.
Mrs. Bonish?
I think there are definitely advantages to both candidates. Obviously, Mrs. Benton has a lot of experience in Wilmington as a superintendent. I do like the specific interim superintendent skill set that Dr. Connolly has. If we were to bring Joanne back, I think that, she would be coming back not in the exact same position as she was before. And it would have to be clear that it is an interim, and that part of that job would be to do some of those things that Dr. Connolly did, which was, maybe some mentoring and helping out with the superintendent search. And so, conditionally, I think that she would be a good choice. But again, I think they both have, they both have good qualities. So.
Great. Mr. Talbot?
I can't consider her because I don't know her. I don't have a resume. I don't know anything about her. She couldn't take the time to show tonight. So my only decision would be Dr. Connolly.
Okay, so I think we've had some comments on both the experienced candidates. At this point, I think we can, if there's no further discussion, or Mr.
I have a
Mullis?
question. Mrs. Bonish mentioned something about condition, or how will we know what condition? How can we have that communication? We can't talk with her.
The motion would be pending contract negotiations.
What would those conditions be?
Well,
What
those
conditions
we'd have to work through with Dr. with Mrs. Benton.
But we're voting on something, but we haven't had the opportunity to ask her whether she would be willing to do what we're going to be conditioning her. And that's where, I'm having a little bit of concern.
That's, I can understand.
And
And, we have Mr. Talbot, who doesn't know her, and never work with her, doesn't have any information to go with. So he's voting on something that he doesn't really understand,
And nothing to compare it to.
nothing to compare it to. So,
But in saying that, and I get it, because I'm comfortable in my choice and my decision, with hopes that we can address this and address it. I don't think it's an unreasonable request, that this is what we'd be looking for. Her position would be to meet the needs of us in the district, as she's always has. The other aspect is that over the past couple of weeks, we've received, and granted that I just would share with you that there's a lot of people who have had that experience of working under Joanne Benton that we've heard and who've sent correspondence to all of us on, sharing their thoughts about it. I hope that, I know that she wasn't here for you, Mr. Talbot, but I hope you would at least think about taking that into consideration, because, and I get it. I totally get the position, and it's not an easy position, not knowing what you're, asking to vote on. If she's not here, you don't know her. But it weighs heavy on me, the needs of our district and what they're asking for. And I personally can't see anything to preclude it. Granted, I have a little more information, I understand, but preclude not giving our community and our district what they need. And I feel secure in that, knowing Mrs. Benton and her work and her accomplishments in this district in her term. And so that's what I would offer to you, that with the limited information that you have, you'd see the accomplishments that she has had in the district as a possible consideration, if you entertain it.
Well, I'm not gonna hire somebody sight unseen. I mean, if she really wanted to have this position, she would have been here tonight. It's been known for a while.
She had this position for 7 years, 5 years as a superintendent, and then a couple of years as assistant superintendent. Prior to that, she was superintendent in the Lexington school system, and she retired. She's not unknown to this community. And I understand. I think I'm not denouncing your position by any means, because I would feel the same way. But there is I just find, I struggle with the fact that there is so much of her still that built this high school, that built the strength of our staff, and was an intricate part of our community. That was at every football game, even, there's so much about her that I still see walking in any of the schools. I'm just a big fan. Either way, I think both people have their, I'm struggling now, forgive me, impeccable resumes. I assure you of that. And I think it'll come down with familiarity as someone not as familiar. But that's,
Yeah.
please.
I'm just going to
Thank you.
comment on feelings regarding Mrs. Benton. And I'm going to echo very much what Mrs. Burns has shared. We have heard a lot from the community. I think the community at whole has made it quite clear what their wishes are. From my standpoint as the chairperson, this has been quite a crazy few months. This is not what any of us signed up for. I have felt very inadequate in my position as chair, but at the same time, trying to just move forward and continue with business, and it's been a struggle. I think all of us have felt that it's time to get back to business, and how quickly we can do that, the better off our community will be, the better off our children will be. And I'm seeing nodding heads in the audience. So for me, yes, we have a couple of great candidates, but who knows this community the best? This is an interim position. We've discussed that this is an interim role. We do have some talented people in this district that we could consider maybe mentoring and moving into that position, or maybe we decide we need to do a search and really look at what else is out there. We all are very impressed with Mr. LaCava. Maybe there's an opportunity there. I'm not sure yet, but I do know that there's quite an urgency to fill this, and I'm feeling very comfortable that Mrs. Benton could easily step into the role and get us back to business as quickly as possible. I do make note and take to heart Mrs. Bonish's comments about conditionally, that we need to right the ship. And let's move forward. Let's stay the course with the strategic plan. We're not looking for massive changes the rest of this school year. I don't think any of us could tolerate that at this point. I think the mentoring piece will become apparent and necessary, but that's my point. Mr. Bjork.
I've jotted down a motion that I hope may address some of Mrs. Bonish's concerns. Hopefully Mr. Mullis as well. I don't think this is going to satisfy you so much, Tom, but here's my motion. I motion that we appoint Joanne Benton pending contract negotiations. If those contract negotiations were to break down, we offer the appointment to Dr. Conley pending contract negotiations. Within those contract negotiations would be the conditions that Mrs. Bonish has been talking about.
Is there a second on the motion that's been made?
I'll second.
Okay. Discussion.
Anyone want to? All right, so, as I mentioned before, I thought Dr. Conley did a great job and have a lot of respect for Joanne. And if the board feels that we should bring Joanne back, I think we should work together as a committee and show full support. So I will go along with the vote for Mrs. Benton if that's what the board wants. However, I do want to make it clear, I am disappointed that she wasn't here, mostly for the fact that Mr. Talbot is new to the school committee. Mr. Talbot should have been able to ask questions or at least get to know who she was. But I want to make sure that if we are going to vote this in, that we do it as a group together and we all support it because it is important that we start that healing process. So that is my, my comment, my discussion, and if that's what the committee wants to do, I will support it 100%.
Further discussion?
I mean, I can't support it. I haven't met her, so I'm against it.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. I think at this point, if there's no further discussion, we are ready to take a vote. Mr. Bjork?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonish?
Yes.
Mrs. Burns?
Yes.
Mr. Mullis?
Yes.
No.
No. Mrs. Broussard, yes. Okay, so we have voted that we are going to make an appointment of Mrs. Benton pending contract negotiations, making sure that I get the motion.
If those contract negotiations
break.
were to break down,
We would appoint Dr. Connolly pending contract negotiations. Okay, thank you. And with that, I think we could make a motion to adjourn.
so
Anybody-
moved.
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Burns, second. All those in favor? Great, thank you very much.